So you're probably wondering why I'm laying on the garage floor, and quite honestly, it's just because I can. See, my garage floor is completely cleaned up. It's had the whole surface ground off of it, and I don't know, it's kind of nice down here. It's nice and cool. You could eat off this floor. If I was stranded on a desert island, all I had was my garage floor, I would totally eat on my garage floor. Let's do a shop tour. What's going on, everyone? I'm Jody. This is Inspire Woodcraft. Today we're doing a shop tour. Now, I've never done a shop tour before, so we'll see how this goes. I just recently got through doing a huge overhaul of my garage. As some of you know, I work out of my garage, and I always shared this space with, well, storage stuff. So I'm going to get to the shop part of this in a minute, but I wanted to show you the core of how I was able to actually separate the two of these things. So this side of the garage is actually the storage side, and what I have is I have this plastic wall that's up here. I've run this plastic all the way across, and I've actually taped off the edges all the way around. This is a 3mm plastic you can get from anywhere. I got it from the Home Depot because, like I've said before, that's the closest store to me. It has a zipper door so that I can get in and out of it, and both sides zip up and roll out of the way if you want. I found it easiest for me is just to unzip one side and kind of sneak through like you do in a tent. Basically, it works by attaching these long poles, sort of like a shower curtain hanging rod, but vertically up to the wall. They have clips up at the top that hold the plastic. You don't need a ladder, you don't need anything like that. This is actually the box that it comes in if you go to the store looking for it. I'll try and throw a link down below if I can find one. I've had this thing up now for about 3 weeks, I think. It's worked amazing, and because I have it taped off, it means the dust I create from that side isn't coming over here. You might see things like this at, say, a hospital or a medical facility where they need to do construction on a certain area, but they can't have dust spreading out throughout the office or the building. They use systems like this one, but this is the one that I found. I'm so grateful that I stumbled across it because I was going to originally do a built-in stick-framed wall with a door and all that. This is temporary, which means I can take it down in the event that we move. I can turn this into a garage instantly when I start packing everything else up. I just take this down. So I think that's the long and short of this side of it. Now we'll get into what you all came here to actually see, which is the shop tour. So first off, before I forget, I wanted to show you guys this. I have a remote. It basically has what I call a pigtail that comes off of an outlet that you plug an item into. So say your shop vac. A lot of people like to use these for dust collection. You could actually turn on your dust collection with the remote. 4 out of my 5 overhead lights actually plug into an outlet, and they don't have their own on-off switch. So this allows me to have all of those on a switch that I can operate remotely, which means when I'm on the other side of the wall, I can turn the lights off. When I come in the morning, I can turn the lights on. This is pretty cool. It came in a pack of 3. I'm not using the other 2 right now, but again, I could use one for the shop vac or something, as long as I don't mind toting this remote all over the place. For right now, I just use the lights. Anyways, this was a huge upgrade. I also updated the power strip. I cleaned up the ceiling quite a bit. When they did the remodel in this garage to begin with, they had wires going everywhere. It just was enough to drive me insane. I also cleaned up the ceiling where they had a bunch of old makeshift panels halfway nailed up there. I cleaned all that up, got rid of all the wiring and the garbage and just the noise in the background. 1, because it bothered me, and 2, to make my video quality a little bit better and my photography so I don't have so much junk in the background taking away from the subject. Alright, so I suppose I should just start with I don't know, the bandsaw, and we'll just work our way around the room. This is my bandsaw. It's 14-inch Rikon, and I absolutely love this thing. I did a couple small, super cheap modifications to this, and one of them is this tray. This tray is completely magnetic and removable. I made it out of some scrap tempered hardboard I had laying around. I epoxied some magnets to the back of it, and the idea is that it clips right back on as I'm cutting stuff out, and I have small pieces. Instead of them getting worked over and off to the edge over here where they would fall on the floor before, I can make a conscious effort to actually take them and slide them into this tray. When this tray fills up, I can just take it off and I can dump it into a wood storage bin, a scrap bin of sorts. So this has made a huge improvement. I've used it several times since I made it, and I love it. I think it's a great idea. You could probably find a magnetic parts tray or something to do a similar job. I just had stuff laying around and I figured I'd go for it. So in this shop, I'm still running on basically one outlet and an extension cord. So every time I go from the bandsaw to the sander or whatever it is, I have to unplug and plug the new tool in, and it's a real pain in the butt. So to prevent from having to bend down each time I go to unplug and plug something in, I tried to get all of the electrical cords up at least at waist level so that I could get to them. So with this, I just attached a magnet with tape and I can just stick it to here. I've got a screw clamp down here, and I don't normally use screw clamps too much, except for when I'm at the bandsaw. I use them to hold round stock as I feed it through to prevent the blade from pulling down on that round stock and causing mayhem. I made this bracket. I actually made it so it would hold 3. I only have 1 right now, which is fine, but I can slide this back on and just leave it on here. It's out of the way. It doesn't interfere with the doors or any of the adjustment knobs or anything, and this has worked out pretty well. Alright, so right next to the bandsaw is the drill press. Floor stand model. It's an old Delta. I've probably had it close to 20 years. All the time I've ever owned it, I've never had a decent table, so I made a halfway decent table. Old piece of melamine shelving that I had that was still straight and flat. I covered it with 1/4-inch tempered hardboard, and then I waxed this. I made a adjustment knob fence type system. It's pretty elementary, but it'll get me by, and it'll also allow me to see what it is I do and don't like about a fence system for a drill press. I'd also like to eventually make one that incorporates some sort of dust collection, and so I'm still going to play around with that. In the meantime, this will kind of give me my do's and my don'ts. Eventually, maybe I'd like to make cabinets under here for storage. That would tidy up things a little bit more. This will work for now. Same thing, I have the cord with a magnet on it. This can be stuck under here somewhere. I promise it can. Or in my case, I just leave it up there. It's within arm's reach. The other thing is I put the chuck on a lanyard, which it's always been on a lanyard, but the lanyard finally broke. When I replaced the lanyard, I also glued a magnet to the housing, and now that magnet just, I can just take this on and off, use it as I need, just throw it up there. It won't fall in the dust and the debris underneath. I won't lose it. And it keeps it up and out of the way. So super cheap little upgrade that makes a huge difference in my shop flow. Oh, and to use this, this is, like I say, this is a simple design. It has a threaded knob here that can come out if need be, so we can completely remove the fence. Otherwise, the knob just drops in. There's a threaded insert underneath, and it can spin this way. So that's how you're going to get your front and back. You can clamp it to one spot just with the clamp, and it doesn't go anywhere. It actually moves the press before it moves the fence. And then I have an adjustment knob just with a screw here, a nut on the back, and when the nut slides inside of here and grips, it stays pretty secure. So I think this will work pretty well until I decide to upgrade again. Alright, so some of you guys coming over here to watch this from Instagram, you guys followed along and you saw that I decked this whole place out in French cleats. Now, for those that don't know what a French cleat system is, a French cleat system has a 45-degree angled cut. It has a top and it has a bottom. The bottom gets fixed to a stationary object, usually the wall, and then the other half gets attached to some sort of a fixture that becomes removable. Now, the whole idea behind a French cleat system in a shop is that you can move things and rearrange it as necessary. Typically what happens is a person will build a whole, they'll face a wall or part of a wall with French cleats, and they'll have a whole bunch of different levels to it. And so they have, say, this drill bit holder, but they don't like where this drill bit holder is anymore, so they can just take it off of there really easy, and they can move it up a notch, or they can move it down, or they can move it to another part of the wall. In my shop, I decided that I would put this French cleat system all over the place so I could move anything I wanted to anywhere else that I wanted to, depending on my workflow for that project. So it's pretty easy. It just simply slides on like this. So you can put it on, walk away, take it off, walk away, I don't know. The other thing is for me, almost everything has flat bottoms so that I can move them out of my way and onto another surface in the event that I need to. Say for cleaning, I want to get back into this spot and I want to clean back here, or I want to move something around or whatever, these might get in the way. Now I can just take them, put them up on top of this surface, do what I need to do, put them back if I want, put them somewhere else if I want, and it all works out really well. Alright, so moving on from the drill press, what we have is the miter saw station. Now I have here my 10-inch miter saw, which this is actually the first miter saw I ever owned. It's an old Delta. I have the upgrade, which is the 12-inch DeWalt, and then I have one that I got about a year ago, which is actually 1956, if I got my numbers correct, radial arm saw, also made by DeWalt. These three are all in line, so I can use each one of them as necessary. So I could set this one to make 45-degree cuts, and I could set the DeWalt to make straight cuts. I can set the radial arm saw to make end cuts on, say, wider pieces like cutting boards and whatnot. And I can do all those actions without repositioning blades all the time, which I could also have a finishing blade in here. I can have a construction type general purpose blade in the bigger saw, and that's kind of how I have it set up right now. So when I start making art pieces, when I start doing more production type stuff, this workflow is really going to come in handy. I understand maybe you don't have several saws. Saws can be picked up pretty cheap and they can usually be tuned up pretty well. So this might be something, if you're looking to step up your production game, I would definitely recommend something like this. Now on the other side, some of you may have noticed there was an old closet over there. We tore all that out, and when we did, I took and reused the studs for this frame. Essentially this is 4 boxes that are all put together, and then the saws are individually put in between there, and that allowed me to have a little bit of storage. So like the compressor, which I used to have to pick up and carry around and trip over all the time, is now on wheels, and it primarily lives here until I need to drain the tank, which I can just roll it right outside, drain the tank, bring it back in, and it's right where it's supposed to be. It's under here, so it's not in the way anymore, which it was a huge game changer, is getting a lot of this stuff on wheels and out of the way so that I could move things around as necessary. I mean, technically we decreased my workspace by 1/3, and yet I have more room in here than I've ever had before because we thought more about how to use what little room we had, if that makes any sense. So same thing under here. This is under the 12-inch saw. I made a shelf where I was able to put the router table, and you can't see it, but I just have a spot for trash cans. I know that's kind of silly to show, but you know, place for everything and everything in its place, right? Now this cart that the planer is on, this is the cart that the radial arm saw used to be on. By moving that over here, it freed this cart up to put something else on. So like I said, we put the planer on it. I put wheels on it. It's not a perfect setup, and it's overloaded right now because I have a bunch of scrap wood waiting to be thrown out, stored underneath it. But this is a good solution for being able to get the planer out of the way. The planer used to live either on the floor, or I had to pick it up and put it on the bench when I needed to use it, make a big mess, try and find somewhere to store it. Always a pain in the rear. So having this thing on wheels, although not the greatest solution in the world, is a good temporary solution for right now until I make a flip top cart or something like that. And behind it, I have my little 6-inch porter cable joiner. A lot of people give that thing a bad rap. I've never had a problem with it, but to be fair, I never had a planer before, and I had to rely on jigs for the table saw and whatnot. So I'm happy with it. It seems to give me nice, square, flat, true edges, and that's really what I need it for. That's not on wheels because that's light enough. The stand that I made for it, I can pick it up and move it as necessary, use it and put it back in it. Doesn't get used all the time, same with this, and so these two things are able to store over here out of the way. If they're in the way, I can always move them to another spot. Alright, moving on from that corner, we have the assembly table. This thing was originally just a hollow core door with plywood sides. It was built very elementary, and also it was simply just a table, and I've completely transformed this thing into much more. Part of it is I have that same French cleat system, basically almost completely wrapping the outside of the perimeter of this table. And the reason is because I have a bunch of fixtures that I made similar to the other side where I have containers. Now I'll show you these containers in a minute. They're super simple, but the idea is I can put a lot of my most well-used stuff in here, and if I need this space on the table, I can simply take this container and put it here on the side, and that gives me my work surface area back. So if I'm making something that's large enough that I need this stuff out of the way, I can, and because they sit flat on the table, I could also move them to another surface if I really needed that much space where I needed to overhang. So as of right now, that's a pretty sweet system. Again, I've used this plenty since I started this, and this thing, man, it just makes it makes a world of difference. All right, so here's some of these fixtures. We have just this simple tray. It's got a T-handle on it so that we can pick it up and move it as necessary. I've got my glues, epoxies, and stuff that I use all the time in there. This is another little deal here. It's got a handle, same thing. If I can see what I'm doing. Sets on the side, and it just hangs there. This also has a drawer where I can put miscellaneous objects and bits and pieces that I use all the time. Has a spot where I can store rulers, squares. Most of the time that thing will just live up there on the assembly table because it's stuff I need. But again, the idea is I can move it away from there if I need this space. I also made just a few other little holders. Same thing. Set these up here, made a small trash can for pencil shavings and tape and, you know, packages when you open stuff and you need somewhere to put it. And as you can see, I put that cleat pretty much running all the way down, so I can move those things wherever I want. I can move them to the other side of the table, I can move them up here depending on my workflow, and you'll see why that really makes a difference here in a minute when I get to the other board. Also on this table, I put some OSB on the sides because it was a cheap alternative to actual plywood. And this is where I have my clamp storage. This is a clamp rack that I made that I can't use right-handed. I'm actually left-handed, so that makes sense. All my F-style clamps can go here. We've got a hook, handmade. Now none of these are on French cleats. These are all actually screwed into the OSB. But it just makes a really nice spot to store things. And as you can tell, since this thing's on wheels as well, they don't come out from the edge of the table. And that's really important because I want to be able to stand here without having to huddle over these things. If we keep moving, underneath here, I just put a small shelf, and that's just to hold certain things. I've got a couple more pieces of OSB and some foam and plastic and just random stuff that I don't want out here. Eventually, if I have this table for that long, I'd like to make a full system of shelves or something in here to really utilize that space. Now on this side of the bench, we have the same thing. I have a couple of cleats that are nailed up there or screwed in up there. And then I have more brackets. This is where I've got some of my longer clamps. This is where I have finally my K5 mounted. Now this does hang on a cleat. And now the wings are there. If you're not familiar with this system, inside this is where you house all your bits and pieces. And now this thing can be thrown on a table, used, and when I'm done with it, I can kind of just clean it up and store it back on the cleat system. Next to the jig, I actually have open containers of screws that I use quite a bit. And so now they're within easy reach. These are on cleats as well. So I can take it up here and I can use it. I can grab a screw, use it for what I'm, trying to do. And when I'm done, I can put that away. Now before I forget, this is my cart that I made up for my shop vac and for this guy, which is the dust stopper. This is a separator, separates the dust. The vacuum pulls, obviously, sucks the dust through the main hose and into here, and the dust settles into this container and keeps only the fine dust in here. This thing works amazing. I just made it on this simple cart setup with a handle back here, and I made a hook for it to store a secondary hose and try and keep the cord off the floor. And now I can move this thing to each machine or clean up as necessary, and it's completely on wheels, just like most everything in the shop. All right, now you guys might recognize this stuff from the shop before. This is essentially like a plywood storage bin, if you will. It just holds a lot of scraps and nonsense in here. Probably need to go through and clean some of it out. This is on wheels, and this is an old dresser that I had that I converted into a storage area and also a work cart for the sander. So the sander lives up here. Underneath here I can put storage, which is obviously what I have here, but I was able to take the sanding station off the back and actually mount it to a wall over here, which I'll show you in a second. This is on wheels too, so I can move around. I can get to the dust port in the back. It just lives here against the wall next to this guy. These save a lot of space being on wheels. Now right above the sanding station and the storage bin, I actually have this cabinet. Now this cabinet's fairly experimental. So far so good. It's super functional. This is all made out of 1/2-inch plywood. I've got dowels to hold stuff up top. It's not necessary, but I put it there and it looks a little more polished that way. What's really cool about this cabinet is that I have all my quart size cans up here, and I actually have sprays in the back and some solvent based materials as well. And so this actually works really well. This little deal that I have here helps take the weight off the hinges on the other side, but the thing really works super smooth. I can come in here, grab what I need, close the door, you get it. Super handy. I doubled up my space basically, and I don't have a shelf dedicated to living on the floor, which would be not movable. I guess I could get a shelf with wheels, but I wouldn't want to be wheeling all this stuff around anyways, because knowing me, I'll run over a cord or something, it'll spill everywhere and I'll have a big mess on my hands. So anyways, pretty cool stuff. All right, now this is the same dresser that I had before. This used to be my wife's old dresser, and when she got rid of it, I took it out into the shop. I used to, years ago, have my miter station on it, and actually just recently, until I did this, I had my miter saw up here. Right now, it's, I think, going to be where I do my product photography. I think I'm gonna make a nice bottom layer for it, and then maybe like a wall, and I can have this for a little spot where I shoot photos. But for right now, it has a couple of random things on here that I haven't quite found space for. And I have my enormous vise up here because it's really heavy and I don't have anywhere else to put it. By making the storage systems on the wall, like the French cleat systems, I opened up a lot of space in the drawers and was able to get rid of a lot of stuff and really clean up. And so now I've got a lot of stuff in the drawers that used to be just laying all over the place. So one hand kind of fed the next, and so now it's a lot more organized. All right, now earlier I said that a lot of people will take the French cleat system and they'll put it on a wall, and that'll be their primary area where they're gonna organize stuff. For me, I am very limited on wall space. I have a window here. This wall is now made out of plastic, and I have long storage over there above the miter saw station, and my other wall is, well, it's a garage door, so that's not gonna work either. So I just took a small chunk of wall and did the most I could with it. And this is where I have storage. I have, you know, obviously tapes. The sanding station is up here. I have a really cool drill holder that I came up with. But the coolest thing, like I said, about a cleat system is that you can rearrange it as you feel necessary. So you can put power tools on there that you want to reach for all the time. Like say you do a lot of router work, but you don't want it laying out on the table. You can make a storage system for a router. Like I say, I have ones for the drills. I have stuff for rolls of tape, extra tape. I have just shelves to hold bottles of glue and epoxy and stuff like that. This same situation, I can take this thing and I can move it over there to the assembly table where I want to use it. I'm not going back and forth. I'm not taking up table space. And to me, that's a huge game changer, because now it keeps stuff out of my way. It gives it a home to go back to when I'm done with it. So at the end of the day or the end of the week, when you do a maintenance, a scheduled cleanup, you have a place to put stuff back. And if this doesn't fit your workflow, you just rearrange it as necessary, and it's that easy. All right, now this is the bench that I originally started out with when I started getting back into woodworking. This is just a normal bench used with construction grade materials, but it looks a lot different. For one, the kids and I went through and we totally squared this thing up and made it more solid. So now, I mean, it really doesn't move hardly at all. We also utilize the French cleat system here so that I can put hardware bins on here. Again, same thing like everything else. I can move stuff around as necessary for what I'm doing. I don't really use this as a work surface as much anymore. I might now. It used to always just be a place to collect junk, which most work surfaces do become that after a while. So maybe it'll just be my leaning desk from now on. I like that. I think that's gonna about wrap it up for me. Hopefully you guys got enough out of this to get some inspiration to go out and fix up your own workplaces. It's super nice to be able to not only have a spot for something to go, but know where that thing is supposed to go back. And then with the cleat system, it's nice to be able to rearrange those spots as your workflow changes. This should make me a lot more productive, a lot more organized, and I should really be able to knock some stuff out now. Along with that, to be absolutely honest, it kind of gives you a bit of a confidence boost because you feel just more productive just walking into the shop. At least that's the case for me. One more thing that I may have not said at the beginning of the video is that I ground down the concrete. And what I mean by that is I literally ground the entire floor as if you were running it through a surface planer. It didn't get it completely flat, but what it did is it took off a very top layer of concrete which had a bunch of just nasty stuff on it. That gave this place a nice airy feel. Now obviously that wouldn't be necessary for you necessarily, but for me, I had so much nasty stuff on it that I didn't even want to really work in here. So that made a huge difference. So anyways, yeah, do me a favor and hit the like button if you liked this video, subscribe if you aren't already, and don't forget to hit the notification bell, and that'll tell you when I have videos coming out. I do have some simple drawers that I'm gonna make. I need to do a mountainscape piece, and I've had a few people request that I show how I do those. So some cool stuff down the road. Hopefully I can get back into making videos. It's been about a month, maybe 3 weeks, and in YouTube land, that's like 3 or 4 years. So anyways, thank you so much for watching this video, and let me know in the comments if you see anything that could benefit you or some things that you think I should change, because obviously I can't think of everything. Anyways, until the next video, I will talk to you guys later. Remember when your parents said don't play with the lights? They didn't have a remote. This is so fun. I don't know what it is. They just on, off, on, off.